Hi, I'm Joseph Lidster, and you're listening to the Sirens of Audio.
G'day audiophiles, welcome to the Sirens of Audio, the podcast that explores the universe of Doctor Who in the audio medium. My name is Dwayne, I'm your host. Thank you for listening and thank you for watching. If you're doing so via YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe and share so as many people as possible get to share this audible goodness. Today Philip and I will be sharing part 2 of our chat with one of the founders of Big Finish, Gary Russell. He was there right from the start. He was a long-term producer and directed many of the early episodes in the Big Finish main range, which has finished in the month of March 2021. Been running continuously for a very long time. One other thing that struck me that Big Finish did in those early days, spearheaded by Gary Russell and Jason Hay-Gallery, was the return of the Brigadier. Before Big Finish started doing Doctor Who, the Brigadier, or Nicholas Courtney, had appeared with 6 of the 8 Doctors, and Big Finish was going to mend that so that by 2001, Nick Courtney would have appeared with each of the 8 incarnations of the Doctor, mostly as the Brigadier, and of course with William Hartnell he wasn't playing the Brigadier, but he had appeared with all incarnations of the Doctor, including the 8th Doctor, by the time Minuet in Hell was released, which was the last story in the very first 8th Doctor Paul McGann series that started with Big Finish main range number 16, and Minuet in Hell was number 19. So I'm going to play a trailer for that for you before we head into our chat with Gary Russell. But first, here is a little tribute from the artists formerly known as Me 1 and Me 2 to the era that is the monthly range of Big Finish Doctor Who audios. What's wrong, Me One? I think this old CD collection of mine is wearing a bit thin, Me Two. Download only. All these CDs are making me giddy. A tear, Me Too? It's the end for the monthly range at Big Finish, but the moment has been prepared for. No, my dear Me Too, they must die. Die, main range. Die, main range. Canon stories, canon stories, canon stories, Me One. There are audios out there that we still haven't heard yet. Under piles of box sets, still in their original impossible to open without a machete plastic wrap. Stories we've fallen asleep to and merged into our dreams. Come on, Me Too. We've got audios to listen to. Will it hurt, Me One? Yes, Me Too. Good. The Big Finish box sets have been fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. But you know what? So's the monthly range, Me One. I don't want to go to box sets, Me Too. I will always remember when the monthly range was all we had, Me Too. Main range. I let you go.
Doctor Who, Minuet in Hell.
The legends of Gallifrey speak of a world where everything is horror. Horror and pain. A world from where there is no escape. From the creatures who crawl on the crust of the land. Of the lost and the hopeless and the broken and the doomed.
Hellfire! 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 Hellfire!
Strange chap, that one. If it's all right, I may pop back again tomorrow to check up on him. Fellow interests me.
No problem, Mr. Lethbridge Stewart. Tomorrow, anytime.
The legends of Gallifrey speak of a world, and the name of the world they speak of is hell. Hell is where I have come to at last. And there can be no escape. And so I cannot escape my own hell.
You're a bit of a sad case, aren't you?
Tell me about your vision. How did you decide?
Vision? You think I had a vision? Good God.
Yes, I do think you had a vision. What was? I mean, when you're in this BBC office, these three ladies tell you you've got Doctor Who. What's your thinking? What's your steps for making Big Finish?
Panic. Absolute unbridled panic of, oh my God, we've got what we've always wanted. What do we do? The first thing I think, other than, I think Jason and I probably farted around for a couple of weeks saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And again, I think this is where I took the lead and said, this is what we're going to do. So I immediately contacted Colin and Sylvester, both of whom I knew very well, good friends of both of them, and said what we were planning to do. Were they interested? And both of them came back and said, yes. I said, good. Could you talk to Peter? I mean, I knew Peter. I'd met Peter. I'd interviewed Peter. I wouldn't have said I was ever a friend with Peter at that point. I wouldn't have known him well enough to pick up the phone and just go, hi, which I did with the other two. So I think Colin spoke to Peter. And then I was able to drop Peter a line saying, I know Colin's spoken to you. This is what we're planning to do. And Peter was on board straight away as well. So we had our three doctors. The moment that was done, and I knew I had them, the next thing I could do was go to companions.
You didn't try for Tom at that stage at all? You just...
No. There was no point. I knew we wouldn't get Tom straight away. And there was just part of me that just thought further down the line, in the same way I did with Paul. I thought, let's work with the three that we know, who know us, get this thing going. They trust us. They know, they think we know what we're doing. And of course, Colin had done one of the Bennies with us anyway, so he kind of knew the setup from the word go. So no, we didn't go for Tom at that point. We went for Tom about a year later, I think. But we just wanted, and Jason said, we do one release every other month. We won't go monthly. It's too much work to go monthly. And I was like, okay, thinking, no, I want to go monthly. And then we went monthly, and I thought, no, can we go back to being every other month, please? It's too much work. And you know what? It was just fun. I mean, there were nightmares, there were problems, there were things that went wrong. But generally, for 8 years, I kind of was in charge of Doctor Who. And that was pretty damn cool. That was the childhood ambition writ large. And because it was collaborative, you when you're writing a book, it's you and the editor, and that's pretty much it. When you're doing Big Finish as a producer, you've got this collaboration with other directors. You've got Nick, Steve Cole, Jack Rayner, Jason. You've got all your sound designers. You've got a little sort of Greek chorus of friends around you as well, who are all very passionately interested in it. And I never underestimate the importance of someone like Clayton Hickman, who lived around the corner from me and was doing the covers, but he was living with Mark Wright at the time. And the two of them in their little flat and me, the ideas we would all just throw around and be generally creative. And I was very determined to take lots of creativity from other people, because when you're writing a book, it is you on a page. When you're doing something like this, it's not about you, it's about everybody. So my philosophy of Big Finish, if you like, to go back to the question you asked 850 hours ago, was I'm not making this for me. I'm making this for a very wide audience, some of whom like that kind of Doctor Who, some of whom like that kind of Doctor Who, some like that kind of Doctor Who. And my job is, out of 12 releases a year, to make sure each of those groups of people are satisfied 6 times a year. So it isn't about what I personally want with Doctor Who, it's about what that audience, and I've been in and around fandom long enough and was wise enough to recognize that there are aspects of Doctor Who that I don't like, the New Adventures, for instance, but there's an audience for it, so you have to make those people happy. You want to try and make sure, and the joy of something like an individual 2-disc release is, sitting on its own, is you're not trying to do what the BBC books did, and to some extent Virgin did as well, with the New Adventures of the BBC, with the Eighth Doctor Adventure, where everything had to be this ongoing, huge, interlocked thing. And when you're 20 books into a range, if you haven't read the previous 20, you are screwed. So I was very determined right from the word go that would never be a situation. There would be no ongoing arcs. There'd be no ongoing stories. There'd be no feeling that if you didn't buy the Peter Davison story, you weren't going to understand the Sylvester McCoy story. And if you didn't like Peter Davison's Doctor, there was a Sylvester coming along a week later, and so on and so forth. So my job was not to please Gary Russell. My job was to please as many people in Doctor Who fandom as you possibly can. It didn't always work because Doctor Who fandom is a very hard beast to please all the time, but it didn't matter to me. I was just out there putting out product as varied and interesting as I possibly could, on the assumption that if someone didn't like March's release, the chances are they would like April or May's release. And after a couple of years, we realized this must be working, because our subscription base went from about 30 people to about 600 almost overnight, where people were willing to go, right, we will subscribe for a year, because even if we get 2 plays a year we don't like, they'll still be of reasonable enough quality that we'll listen to them. And people were willing to invest in the company and the product. So I thought we'd done quite well at that point. So yeah, that was my philosophy behind it all. That was my ambition for Big Finish, was to appeal to as wide an audience as you possibly could.
So you grabbed the 3 Doctors, you grabbed a heap of companions who were happy to come back and work. There's a tale of a meeting you had with writers.
Yeah, that was very early on. That was the first announcement really to anyone. I mean, the only people at that point who knew were me, Steve, and Nick. And Jack knew. Jack Rayner knew. So yeah, I said to Gary Gillett, look, I need to have in fact, actually, he must have known, because I said, I want to use your living room because it's bigger than mine, and you live fractionally closer to a railway station than I do, and people might actually turn up. And so Gary very generously gave us his house for a day, and I just invited a handful of people along and said, look, this is what we're going to be doing, and I would very much like it if you'd be interested in submitting story ideas. And I think at that meeting, everyone bar one, which was Stephen Moffat, ended up working for us at some point. Stephen is the only person that never worked for Big Finish. And he said at the time, and bless him, he was completely honest about it. About a third of the way through the meeting, he said, so what you're saying is you're going to use old Doctors? And I said, yes. He said, you're not going to cast your own Doctor and do this new? And I went, no, that's not what our license is for. Our license actually specifies, it must contain the cast of Doctor Who and the Doctors. And so he said, this isn't for me. And he left. And he said, I don't think this will ever get off the ground, but good luck. And I think, in a way, many years later, when he has the 8th Doctor reeling off Charlie and Kerry's and everything, when he says goodbye, Night of the Doctor, I think that's Stephen's way of kind of going, yeah, I got that wrong, didn't I?
He's actually said he realised. He said he realised he did the wrong thing, and the reason why he actually does all those characters is as an apology, in terms of, I made a mistake, I should have done a story.
Bless. I thought that might be the case, but I didn't know he'd ever said that. Yes. Oh, good. Bless you, Stephen. He just, and he was, but I love the fact he was completely upfront and said, if you've been doing something completely new with Doctor Who, I'd be interested, but I'm not interested in rehashing old stuff. Pretty much the same reason he'd never written one of the novels. It just didn't appeal to him very much. Even
when you got Paul McGann and started really creating new seasons of the show, he wasn't, or he just didn't approach.
He never came back to us, and I certainly didn't approach him again. And he never voiced an interest in doing that. I don't think, even when we were in that meeting and we talked about the possibility of Paul, I don't think it appealed. I think Stephen just wanted to do a completely fresh new take on Doctor Who. I don't think he wanted to do old Doctors. But yeah, I've never been able to completely remember everybody who was in that room. I mean, obviously it was me and Nick. I actually don't think Jason was there. But it was me and Nick, Steve Cole, Jack Rayner, Paul Cornell, Justin. Don't think Peter Angelides was there. Andy Lane may have been there. No, he can't have been, because Andy never worked for us, did he? I can't remember who else was there, to be honest with you. Oh, Gatiss was there. Mark was there. Of course he was. So yeah, it was a nice afternoon.
Were these just people you trusted and knew through fandom? So you just
there were people I'd known for a while. The trust was the important thing, because of course we hadn't announced it and we hadn't signed the contract or anything. So it was people I would trust to go away and think about ideas, who were not going to suddenly turn around and put a letter in a fanzine or even go on the fairly new internet at that point. I mean, I think Recart's Doctor Who was about the only thing you could go on in those days. They were all people I knew would not turn around and blow this, you know, people I trusted. But yes, they're all people I'd known for donkey's years.
So as the scripts came in, were you confident you had what you wanted?
Well, Nick wrote Sirens of Time, so I knew that wasn't going to be a problem. Literally, I just went, off you go. You do Sirens of Time. You do the multi-doctor story that launches it. I knew there'd be no problem with that because I knew Nick could he's a brilliant writer. Mark's Phantasmagoria came in quite quickly. That needed a little bit of work. Justin tapped the whole this could only be done on audio thing straight away with Whispers of Terror, which is kind of one of the things I really wanted. I kept saying to people, always don't think of doing a book on audio. Think about using audio as a medium that wouldn't be able to be done in a book and wouldn't be able to be done on television. Everybody, the ideas came in quite quickly and we filtered through them very quickly. There was nothing in that from those original wave of authors that was ever rejected. Every single thing they put through eventually got made. I think Paul took the longest, mainly because he was so busy. So it was quite a long time. I think he submitted The Summoning fairly quickly, and it took us nearly a year, I think, maybe more than a year, to get what eventually became Shadow of the Scourge into a studio. Well, it must have done because it's post Paul McGann, isn't it? Summoning the Scourge. So yeah, it was a creative afternoon, and I went away feeling quite buzzed and quite high on the whole thing. I thought this is going to be good, but I never anticipated how hard work it was going to be. I genuinely thought this was going to be not easy, but I didn't realize that my life was going to be getting up at 9 o'clock in the morning and working through till 11 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. And it pretty much was for the next 8 years. In the end, I had to get an office. I had to move out of the house. My other half was just going, no, you get out of this house. You're not working from home. And that was quite good because I took the computer with me. So the computer was in the office so that when I left the office in the evening, I couldn't work when I got home because, there was nothing, 10 years before smartphones. So once I'd left the office, that was it. If someone sent me an email, I didn't see it until 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock the following morning. And that was quite nice. That was good. But the first couple of years of Big Finish was done out of the spare room in our flat, which is terrifying to think of now. It really is. And then suddenly it just went by in a blur. It really did. I can't honestly say to you that it dragged or that it was ever dull, because it certainly was never dull. But I have a hard job in my head sitting down and sort of, I think the first couple of years I can pace. Once you get to 2000 and we do the first McGann run, from there to the day I left seems to take place in about 10 minutes in my memory now. I just don't know how we did it. Whoosh. And there was, by the time I left, there were 90 plays with my name on as producer, of which probably a good 75 of them also had my name on as director. It was a lot of work, and it was brilliant fun.
So you're producing, script editing, commissioning, directing, nearly everything.
Fundamentally, I had Ian Farrington as my assistant. Ian was brilliant. He looked after the Short Trips books as well, and he did the unit series. But other than that, he just generally kept my sanity going once we'd got the office, and would go and buy me a sandwich every day. God bless him. He was brilliant. And then we had it in the corner of this office. There was a little shut-off area, and Nick eventually turned that into a little sort of mini editing suite for himself, and he'd come in probably twice a week and use that. And the rest of the time he'd work from home. So it was quite nice. It was creative. It was fun. The Brockley Creative, we called ourselves, because we were in Brockley in South East London, where Nick and I both lived. And it was great because lots of our sort of creative friends were local enough that we'd meet up at lunchtime in the pub that was next door because everyone was in walking distance of the office. At that period, there were a lot of creative people in and around that part of South East London. So, Joe and Davy Darlington and all of that crowd would all come and meet us, and we'd go out for drinks and come up with more mad, insane ideas. And then the following morning I'd phone up Joe and go, now you're sober. Do you remember saying that you would do this, this, and this, and this? And he'd be going, no, I didn't. I never said any of that. I'd be going, oh, good. Phew, I don't have to do this mad idea you had at 10 o'clock last night for an audio drama I was saying, this will never work, Joe. And you were absolutely adamant through the pint glass that this was going to be the greatest release we were ever going to do. And then he'd forget it the following morning. Whew, thank God for that.
During those early years, Nick Briggs had a passion project. He had Dalek Empire, and then you had your passion project, Gallifrey.
Yes.
How long had that idea been simmering in your mind?
1978. I remember when Invasion of Time went out, and someone in a fanzine at that point, or probably a year after actually, said they could, because Deadly Assassin and then Invasion of Time, and they said, oh, we can foresee a time where one day a producer of Doctor Who will decide to have an entire 26-part season of Doctor Who set on Gallifrey. And lots of people in the letters page of this fanzine would go, oh my God, that would be terrible. That would be dreadful, an awful idea. And all I could think was, that is the best idea ever. An entire Doctor Who season set on Gallifrey. Oh man, I'm obsessed with Gallifrey and Time Lords. I just love them so much. So yeah, all that time that was burning away in the back of my head. I'd suggested at one point to Virgin or BBC Books. No, it was BBC Books, I think. No, it wasn't. It was Virgin. I suggested to Peter and Rebecca at Virgin. I wanted to do a sort of Barbara Bradford Taylor style, big, thick book called Gallifrey, which would be the entire history of Gallifrey. And it would be this sort of interwoven, magical thing all about the history of Gallifrey from the time of the great vampires right up to sort of the Five Doctors, I suppose, or something like that. And they very sensibly went, no. But I've always been obsessed with Time Lords. So it wasn't, bizarrely, the first thing I thought of doing with Big Finish. I mean, Nick needed his own project because I was running Doctor Who. He was like, well, what do I get to do then? And once we got the Daleks, which we did fairly quickly, it was obvious he was going to do Dalek Empire. And I was like, off you go. Dalek Empire. And indeed, Cybermen. He wanted to do a Cybermen series. Like, off you go. I don't need to be involved in those other than getting the CDs pressed and putting the booklets together. I'm very happy. You do whatever you want with that. Nothing to do with me. Then I began seeing what fun he was having with that and thinking it'd be quite fun to have a little spin-off of my own. But it took a long time. And it wasn't until we did Zagreus in 2003. And Louise and Lala had never met. They'd never met at a convention. They'd never met in their lives before. It's the first time they'd ever seen each other. And they got on like a house on fire in the green room during Zagreus, which is odd because they are two very, very, very different people. And I think it was their differences that made them really, really get on well together. And Lala came up to me at the end of what was her second day of Zagreus. And she said, I really would like to do something again with Louise. And I'd like to do something as well with India. I think the three of us could do a sort of Charlie's Angels in space kind of thing. And I thought, or we could do something set on Gallifrey with Romana and Leela and K9. I said, that's a great idea, Lala. I'll go away and think about that. And I had to say, and it was the first time Lou had worked for us. And so she'd been a bit kind of, I'm not sure about this, don't really understand what's going on. And I said to her at the end of the day, I said, look, how have you found it? Because I'd known Lou since 1977. I met Louise on her second day where she was of being Leela on Doctor Who in Ealing Studios. So we'd been friends for a very long time. And I said, how did you find it? She said, oh, it was brilliant. I want to do more. Let's do some more. Let's do more. I didn't think I wanted to play Leela again. I'm loving this. It's fantastic. So I went away and I said to Jason, this conversation had happened. And he said, oh, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I've always been talking to you about doing something set on Gallifrey. What if we did a series just called Gallifrey? And he said, well, what would you do? I said, I do the West Wing. I do the West Wing meets 24, but much more of the West Wing than 24, frankly. So it'd be quite talky and quite political. And he said, okay, that sounds a great idea. Go and do the first 4. So I got back in touch with Louise and Lala before I did anything else and said, would you be up for this? They both were. I then got in touch with John and said, do you want to come and do K9 again? He said, yes. I thought, right, that's my team in place. Lala had suggested this idea of doing a body swap with Louise. She thought that would have been a fun story. So I thought, when Lala fixes you with that stare and says, I think it would be a really good idea if you do it, basically. So I think Steve Cole immediately got commissioned with that. I said to Alan that they wanted to do a story with India. And I said, but I don't really want to do Charlie because we've just thrown the Doctor and Charlie into the Divergent universe. So can't really be Charlie. And of course, he set up the fact that she'd got two sisters already. So boom, she played her sister, and he was really very into this idea of Nazi collaborator, the Mitford kind of thing. So that came out of that. I also got Alan to write the very first one to set it all up. And he did the last one. And then Justin did the one that introduced the Inquisitor, which meant me going to Linda Bellingham and saying, look, you know, and now there was someone I'd never met Linda Bellingham in my life. And I can't think how I got in touch with her. I genuinely can't. I must have just gone through her agent, I suppose, and said we were doing this series with Louise and Lala, and it'd be really fun. Would you come in and do, you know, just a couple of hours? We've got a courtroom sequence, and I thought it'd be quite fun if we had the Inquisitor. And she was like, oh my God, yes, I'm up for this. However, whatever you want me to do, I'm up for this. So I went back to Justin and said, look, she's really on board. Forget this little 1-2 scene cameo. Let's make her a major character in the whole play. Boom, suddenly she had this name, Dark Hell. And Linda became one of the Regs. And that was it. Suddenly Gallifrey was Louise, Lala, John Leeson, and Linda Bellingham. And off we went. And that first season was so much fun and so good that Jason allowed me to commission the second season before the first one had even been released. So I could, knowing everything we'd set up with season one, I could then really focus on the free time stuff and really have fun with Gallifrey and do this thing. I've always loved this idea that the university would open itself up to aliens from other planets, and that would go wrong, hideously wrong. And the terrorists that Alan had created, the free time thing, and boom, off it went. And it just had legs and it ran. And then we got a third season out of it.
Those first 3 seasons were amazing, with Mary Tan then entering as well. I mean, I still love it today.
So do I. Proudest thing, the thing I'm proudest of those 3 seasons of Gallifrey.
Yeah, they're amazing. Every story is so engaging and heavy. I mean, there's so much to think about and so deep, and great endings every time, and frustrations because it's not Doctor Who, it doesn't have to have a Doctor Who ending. And so you often can't predict where it's going because it actually swings in wrong directions.
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you said that, because it's true. You know, I said to everybody that it's open-ended, because in all the other stuff we do with Doctor Who, we know where Peri goes, we know where Turlo goes, we know where Nyssa goes. With Charlie, and to some extent with Evelyn, I had a blank canvas, and if I wanted to kill them off, I could. I never would. I would never kill a companion. It's a terrible idea to kill companions. But
amen.
Nevertheless, that threat was always there. And so with Gallifrey, it was pretty much the same, because in TV terms, both Romana and Leela and K9 Mark 1 and K9 Mark 2, their stories had finished. So I could actually do anything I wanted with them. It was open season on those characters. And the actors all loved that fact as well. They were like, yeah, we're not having to try and fit this into something from 20 years ago. We're playing this as we are now, and we can go forward with it and we can develop it. And, you know, Alan had given me Narvin, and Justin had brought Bractitel into it. And so we just had this amazing cast of characters that I fell in love with, and was able to go in that gap between seasons 1 and 2 and go, right, so Bractitel's going to be a complete shit. Narvin is going to be, against all his passion and will, forced to become friends, or at least forced to work with Romana and Leela. And all these things I started formulating a sort of long-term plan for all of these characters, and tying the Bractitel stuff in Gallifrey with the Bractitel stuff in with Benny, and realizing quite early on that they were not the same character. And then suddenly going, we're going to have a brilliant scene out of the blue one day where Bractitel's in his room and he turns on a monitor and there's another Bractitel. And the idea that he talks to all these different Bractitels from different universes and different timelines. And you go, what? How is he doing this? And it's all tied into the Pandora thing. And it's just like, oh, I loved it. I'm very pleased that people love it. It's my proudest achievement, because that is, conversely to what I was saying earlier, this was my chance to do an arc. This was my chance to do long form storytelling rather than individual release of the month. Brilliant. Loved it to pieces. So proud of Gallifrey.
Gallifrey, the Inquiry.
A great deal of time and energy appears to have been spent on this affair, I understand. Coordinator Narvin wants it explained. He will bring the evidence against President Romana.
An impeachment? That seems a little ostentatious, Inquisitor.
2 weeks, gentlemen. You have 2 weeks.
For the record, I am Cardinal Braxitel, presiding over this inquiry.
We have to inform the CIA.
There's no call for that, surely.
We don't really have a choice.
But what do we tell the High Council?
I thought this was an independent inquiry.
So it has to be a hoax. There is no such device.
Inquisitor Darkle seems to be trying to prove that since a timonic fusion device is impossible to create, I overreacted.
I can't be expected to help unless I know everything.
There was a complete shutdown on information that was centuries ago.
Yet Braxitel knows.
He was there.
My ruling, as decreed by the High Council, will be absolute. Brooks no appeal or enunciation.
We need someone left alive to interrogate.
Try not to kill anyone. That's what Andred used to tell me. It amused him to say it. My late husband.
Well, I think we can begin.
You mentioned that you had a blank canvas with the original companions that were created for Big Finish. Do you think Evelyn was the making of the Sixth Doctor?
No, I think Colin is the making of the Sixth Doctor. I think what Evelyn did was freed him, I think, because whether he was with Perry or whether he was with Mel, the moment you do that pairing, there's a slight, I mean, Colin resisted it, and rightly so, but there's a temptation for writers, I think, to sort of try and go back to the TV version of the Sixth Doctor. But with Evelyn, nobody ever did it. Somehow Evelyn just made people go, right, we're writing the Big Finish version of the Sixth Doctor now. So I wouldn't say it was the making of the Sixth Doctor, but I think it was the underpinning of it. I think it was, Colin had come in with a very definite, I remember when we did Whispers of Terror, and he sat down at the end of that day, having done that one with Nicola, and he said, right, I have now done the shouty bit, I've done the repeat things 3 times bit, I've done every single cliche that I ever did on television. Can we never do any of those things ever again? Can we now create a new version of the Sixth Doctor that's more along the lines of what I would have liked to have done if I'd stayed on TV? And I was like, God, yes, of course you can. It's exactly what I wanted. I wanted that level of input. And I had that level of input for Colin for the next 8 years, and he probably still has it now. Colin was brilliant to work with at all times because he was engaged with it. He was so creative and he was so committed. And I'm not saying that Sylvester and Peter weren't, but Colin's commitment was above and beyond. He always was passionately interested. He never asked for anything to be changed, I don't think. But he was passionately interested in why things would happen. The only thing he would occasionally do, which of course all actors do anyway, and I never have a real problem with that, is he'd turn around and go, this script makes no sense. I can't say that particular line, or that's not very good English, or no, this is the correct pronunciation. I mean, the apocalypse element. Oh my God, Lala and Colin together with Maggie, the 3 of them sitting there, just constantly going, no, that's not how you pronounce this word. No, that's not how that word's spelled. No, that's not actually what that word means. And poor Steve Cole must have been sitting there going, I write books for a living. It's like, no, that's actually not. Because the 3 of them were just sort of intellectual powerhouses and they were brilliant together. 3 of them absolutely brilliant together.
So you introduced Evelyn, she was Marian Conspiracy, which was the 6th release that you did. So did you know at the very start that you'd be creating a character for Colin, or was it just hard to get?
No, it wasn't hard to get anyone else. I suppose it came out of Sirens of Time and Maggie, and I'd worked with Maggie on Just War in the Bennies.
Yep. She's amazing in that too.
Then Nick had her obviously in Sirens, and I fell in love with her. I thought she's just a lovely human being and a brilliant actress. I could see there was a sort of an interesting thing with Colin because they were both very, very super intelligent people. And so I thought, yeah, there's this huge gap. The trial gives us this amazing gap that the Doctor could travel with any number of people between the end of Mind Warp and the start of Terror of the Vervoids. So I just said to Jason at one point, I didn't actually know. I was in America at a convention and came up with the Evelyn thing with a group of people. The name Evelyn Smythe had been there from day one. So who was Evelyn Smythe sort of became this thing I was throwing around to this group of people at this convention. And I went back with a 1.5 page outline for who Evelyn Smythe would be. And Jason was immediately up for it because I said, if Maggie says no, I'm not doing it. This is about Maggie. This is not about wanting to create a character. If Maggie says no, I'm not interested in doing this because this is Maggie. This character is Maggie. Of course, she said yes. And then gave it to Jack Rayner, and she honed it and gave it to Nick Pegg as well. And he was writing Spectra Lanyon Moore. And then when we came to do Marion, I'd cast Nick and Barney in parts in Marion. So suddenly Nick had this real advantage that he was writing Lanyon Moore. I don't think he knew at the time he was going to direct it, but he was writing Lanyon Moore. And suddenly he was working on Maggie's first story. And he could see the rapport between not just Evelyn and the Doctor, but he could see the rapport between Maggie and Colin. And he was able to go back and then redo huge swathes of his script with their the rhythm of their speech patterns and everything in his head, which made Lanyon Moore 100 billion times stand out so well because he just had the characters off pat. I didn't have to go back and go change that. That's not how Evelyn speaks. It's like that's exactly how Evelyn speaks. Well done. It's just brilliant. So yeah, she was created for Maggie, and Colin loved it. Colin loved the idea of having a companion of his own. He liked the idea it wasn't a young person, and he loved the fact that it was Maggie. And the two of them became huge friends, and they were very, very close friends. And I was, as everyone was with Maggie, you could not fail but to love Maggie Stables. She was just an amazing, astonishing lady.
It's one of the most successful elements for me of the TV series over the last 2 years that we've had an older companion, or physically older companion to the Doctor in the TARDIS. I mean, the character of Graham is probably someone I've connected. I think that worked so well in over the last 2 years. I'm surprised it hasn't been done more often.
Well, I think there's a general thing with TV Doctor Who that the kids in the audience relate to the young companion. But of course it is nonsense because kids relate to an older person.
Their grandparents.
Just as much, if not more, yeah. I mean, and let's not forget, bless her, Catherine Tate was,
spectacular.
She was no Billie Piper or Freema, she was 10 years older than them. And, we got Ian and Barbara. Well, I suppose Ian and Barbara are still in their 20s, really. Certainly Barbara was. Yeah, I always thought, that I suppose, if I'm honest, the original idea for that probably came out of something Tom said years ago about having Miriam Margolyes as a companion, and which he thought would have been a brilliant idea. And he's absolutely right, But then he also wanted a talking cabbage. So, Tom's ideas.
Frobisher.
Win some, lose some. Yeah, Frobisher. Yeah, but you see, Frobisher would never have worked with Tom Baker. Frobisher is perfect for Colin's Doctor.
Yes.
But he couldn't have worked with the Fourth Doctor. He'd have been dominated too much. I think it's very hard to be a companion for the Fourth Doctor and have a great deal of character because Tom's personality dominates. Sarah Jane, Liz Lane was lucky in that she'd been there when he arrived, so he couldn't dominate that personality. But, I think he forced the watering down of Leela, and I genuinely think poor Mary Tams Romana doesn't really have a huge character. She comes in as one thing, and within 4 episodes, she's a screaming heebie-jeebie in the background, and she loses a lot of the sort of potential. And then Lala brings it back in, but of course, then she and Tom ended up getting married, so he couldn't really fight her off either. I think Tom's very forceful personality as the Doctor, or the Fourth Doctor's a very forceful personality. It's quite hard to be a companion with a great deal of character depth against that personality. So yeah, I can't imagine that Frobisher would have worked at all with the Fourth Doctor, but he did work very well with the Sixth Doctor.
Now, we just celebrated 20 years of Paul McGann at Big Finish. Was that how easy was that to get Paul, and how are your feelings about all that happening?
How easy was it getting Paul? A lot easier than we anticipated. The 3 things I wanted when I first set out was Bonnie Langford, Janet Fielding, and Paul McGann. And I was lucky that by the time I left, I got all of them.
We spoke to Janet a couple of weeks ago, and I told her that, and she didn't realise that. She was a bit. She went, "Oh, really?" But yeah, that's great news. Yep.
Well, that was done. I got to tell you, we're talking about the 2003 Whovention in Australia. That deal was done at that convention.
Yeah, she said that.
It wasn't really done. It was sparked there. The conversation was had with her going, no. I remember sitting in the bar with her and Wendy, no. And then she went, I'll do one. If it'll shut you up, I'll do one. And I went to bed that night going, yes. Then I had to go back and actually negotiate it with her and make sure that she, remembered and wasn't drunk. But
wasn't it also at that stage Wendy had done one? She did Davros, yes. Didn't she? But she hadn't played Zoe as yet.
No. I see. Under my rule, I wasn't interested. I don't think I got anyone back to play an old companion, other than Sarah Jane in her own adventures. I was much more interested in actors playing different characters. I wasn't interested also in recasting. People have often said, you could recast Hartnell or Troughton or Pertwee, and I was like, no, I could think of nothing worse than recasting a dead actor. How insulting is that to say to them, you were Doctor Who, but you're actually replaceable. So that was very much my philosophy, and I stuck to it. And there was a lot of resistance to that from other people at Big Finish, and that's fair enough, and they've gone on and probably proved me quite wrong. But I was adamant that I wouldn't recast the dead doctors or dead companions, and therefore there was no chance to have a Joe Grant appearance or a Jamie McCrimmon appearance because I wasn't going to have past doctors. So yeah, that never happened. But yeah, so Wendy had done Davros and was very much my champion in my corner, going, "Come on, Janet, do it." And Janet was looking at me and going, "Oh God, you've always been a pain for so many years, haven't you?" And I was like, "Yeah. That's my role in life, is to be a pain in the ass to Janet Fielding. Now come and work for me, bitch." And so she said, yeah, she'd do one. On the proviso that it was only one, and she didn't play Tegan as she'd been in the 1980s, but she had to play Tegan as Janet was now, and preferably get written out. So I did all of those things. I set.
Oh, can I say she claimed you were a total bugger, giving her terminal disease, and it wasn't her choice, and you killed her off. What a bugger you were!
That was her rider for doing it. I was so cross afterwards when she said to people, she went, "Oh, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be with Peter and Sarah and have fun." And I was like, "I've got emails from you saying I'm not prepared to try and play Tegan as she was back in the 1980s. She's got to be me now, and it's got to be a one-off, and you get rid of me at the end." And I didn't kill her. I merely gave her an illness that could or couldn't be saved, because I didn't want to kill her off. But yeah, that was entirely her. And she's always gone on about how awful I was to do that to her. And I was like, one day, I can't now, but sadly, because I haven't got them, but I'd love to find all those emails and at a convention stand there and print them out in big letters and go, "This is what she said." She's evil to me. She really is. We did a convention together about, 5-6 years ago in America. We were the only two guests, because everyone else had dropped out and they were desperate, so they dragged me into it. And Janet had food poisoning, and she wasn't very well for the whole convention. And bugger me if she didn't go up on the first day at that convention and say, "Yeah, I'm not feeling well, I've got food poisoning. Gary Russell's poisoned me. He took me out for food and poisoned me." And I was like, I was sitting there going, just turn this audience against me and make out that I've done this to you. For the whole convention, everything that went wrong was my fault. I love that woman so much. She's just amazing. I love Janet. I love all of them, actually. They're all great people. They're all great characters, those companions.
2006 Commonwealth Games open tonight in...
Interrupt this broadcast with some breaking news. The city's telephone system has been hit by some kind of electronic attack. The entire network has gone down, causing disruption to many homes and businesses and sparking fears of a terrorist attack. Despite pleas for calm, a number of incidents have already broken out.
I know you're a maniac, but do you have to drive like one?
Keep it down back there.
What's happening? What's this all about?
New vandalism could be so painful.
I'll try smashing the windscreen.
This is my life. This is what I do. I work and I sleep and that's it.
Oh.
I thought you'd...
You thought I'd what? Save the world, feed all the starving kids in Africa, be the new James Bond, what?
So, that was the famous Tegan Javenka.
Yeah. I'm still not sure about this.
Stop worrying about it. Now, this doctor, is he going to be a problem?
We should have brought a gun or something. Oh, good idea. That way people die.
That's not human technology, is it?
Not human?
Do try and keep up.
Are we going up or are we going down?
Oh, we're going right to the top.
So, do I get that tip?
Yeah. Get out of here. Get out of Brisbane and don't look back.
Don't leave me, please! Tegan!
And then, the dead will walk.
Mad as a box of frogs.
Where is it we're going?
A bar in Fortitude Valley, bar 8687.
8687! 8687!
Hello, Doctor. The gathering has begun.
Freak! Let me out! Let me go! Now!
That's what terrifies me about him. You have no idea how his mind works. I don't think anyone really knows who he is. His world, his life, it's not like ours.
So as we head into the evening, temperatures are dropping. Hope you all had a great day and are set for the weekend. It starts here, people. It's 6:30 on Friday, September the 22nd, 2006. I'm Rosemary Stark, and here's the Bricklayers with their new single, West.
I just had a question that came to mind that I forgot to ask you. I was talking to Joe Lidster a while back, and about his story. No, it was first thing in the morning, but that doesn't mean anything, does it?
That doesn't mean anything with Joe, heaven forbid.
I was asking him about the 8687 thing in the reaping and the gathering, and he said it was something that was some kind of thing that was made up, but it didn't sort of go anywhere because that's the time around the time you left. So, do you remember what was going to happen with that?
I don't remember what the significance of 8687 was. What the thing we were doing, Joe and I had worked out, or it all started with the fact that Aramem obviously is not mentioned in Cage of Lantazani with all the Doctor's past companions forming it out of his mouth. And so we jokingly in a pub one day said, I wonder why that is. Why doesn't he mention Aramem? Oh my God, the world's come to an end. He doesn't mention Aramem. And then suddenly Joe and I took that very seriously and went, well, why doesn't he mention Aramem? Because obviously at that time, this was the only new companion that he'd had on audio. And I said, as time went on, we talked about doing a story where we would take Aramem, she would sacrifice herself in some way. They wouldn't kill her, but she'd sacrifice herself in some way. And it would erase her completely from Perry and the Doctor's memories. And so we were setting up this stuff. I remember at the beginning of either the Reaping or the Gathering, the Doctor's in this, goes to this kind of outer space place where he sees all the video screens. And there was always these suggestions that things were happening that Aramem wasn't featured in that had actually happened when Aramem was featured in it. I think there were a couple of clips in the background there, and Aramem we'd erased Aramem from those clips and things like that. And it was built into this, and eventually we would do this story where Aramem had to do something and she would get caught in a time storm or something like that. And she would see the result of this. No, she wouldn't. No, I take that back. She wouldn't. She would go. That's right. But we would see as the audience, they would suddenly go, Doctor and Perry would be going, oh, you know, what's that all about? I feel we're missing something. Oh, well, never mind. We'll go back to the TARDIS and never mention Aramem again. And then I had it planned and I'd almost commissioned it actually before I left, that there was then going to, Joe was going to write that one. And then there was going to be a story, and I don't know whether Joe was going to write this or someone else was, where there would be a sixth Doctor and Perry story. And they would meet Aramem for the first time, but Aramem would know who Perry was. And she'd be over the moon. She's finally found Perry, and this must be the Doctor. He's changed because that's the TARDIS. And they would have no idea who she was. And Aramem will be left with this terrible realization that she'd gone through all of these things with these people and been so close with Perry, you know, and all of this. And they didn't know who she was. They had no memory of her. And at the end of the story, they would be sort of almost like we've done at the end of Eye of the Scorpion. They would say, come with us. You know, you're a fantastic person. Come with us on the TARDIS. And Aramem would have to go, I can't go through that again, because if you forget me a second time, this has been hard enough. And so she says, no, she stays where she is. But she'd have this awful thing of being the companion that was erased from the Doctor's timeline. And then she would find out about it, and it would be devastating to her. So that was me being a complete evil bastard to poor Ehrman.
It's tragic as.
Yes, it was. You know, as I've always said, I don't believe in killing companions, but you know, my God, that's. And then of course, you know, Donna Noble 10 years later, but that was what we were doing, and that's what we were setting up with all that stuff. The 8687 stuff was something to do with that Joe had worked out. But yeah, it was also, we were going to erase Airmen from Peter Davison and Nicola Bryant's memory. And then cruelest thing in the world is to put them back together again, or put the Sixth Doctor and Perry back, and Airmen know who they were. And she'd be saying things to them like, oh, there's such and so, you get that from that cupboard in the TARDIS. And they'd be thinking, how the hell does this girl know about the TARDIS? How does she got memories of adventures that Perry had in the past? You know, and Perry would be really freaked out about this. And she'd be going, I travelled with you. And they'd be going, no, you didn't. And it would just be heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. And we wanted to do one of those typical emotional Lidster style, everyone's heart is broken at the end of it kind of stories. And that was, yeah, that would have happened. That was one of the plans that was aborted. And then as a result of me leaving, of course, none of that is even ever mentioned ever again. So all that stuff we'd set up in those stories went nowhere.
Yeah. No, that's good to know. I'll be able to sleep properly now.
The other thing I was working on before I left, my next mini-series after I Davros, was the Forge series, which was going to be Ace and Hex running the Forge.
Oh, wow.
We'd plotted out and planned and started to commission, and that never happened. But that would have been brilliant. Well, I don't know whether it would have been brilliant. I loved it because I liked it.
No, it would have been brilliant. The Forge was such an amazing idea. And yeah, Ace and Hex works so well. Yeah, that would be great.
Yes. And that really came out of the recording of The Settling, which was the point where I really knew that Phil and Sophie just clicked, and they're finishing each other's sentences and all this. And I was just like, yeah, you two get on really well, and Ace and Hex get on really well as well. I want to do a spin-off with them. And the Forge, because of both Phil's connection, obviously, with the Forge and his mum, and the sort of thing that Ace would do, I thought it just made perfect sense. And they were going to leave, not forever, but they were going to go and leave and do the Forge series. And I had 2 scripts commissioned that introduced a new companion for the 7th Doctor, who was an Indian girl. And I even had an actress ready to play her. And she was going to go off and have a series of adventures with Sylvester's Doctor. And you would then realise, a long time before the Doctor did, that she was a Zygon and she was up to no good. And the Doctor would then change her perspective on everything and make her a hero, which I'd sort of tried to do with the old Radio Times comic strip, but we'd lost that. And I wanted to redo that again and do it properly and do it successfully this time. So that was one of the other things that got lost. What else did we lose? We lost I'd commissioned Claws of Clarthy, which was a story set in the Indian Raj, and I got Stephen Baxter. He was commissioned to write the 100th story originally, and that was underway. The 3 or 4 scripts that were all commissioned and then got dropped, and some of them stuck around, and you know, Nick made them. Dark Husband was one, Absolution, Son of the Dragon. They were all commissioned by me. I think there's a couple of others. I think there's a Colin Brake one that was commissioned by me that got made in the end. But yeah, generally Nick came in and just went, wipe that and start again, which is fair enough. Why would you want to pick up, you know, K9's doggy bag of other people's scripts? So yeah, so there was some good stuff that was lost. I particularly thought Claws of the Clarthy was a great script. It was nice. We had an Indian writer writing that, and that would have been a nice bit of, you know, I didn't think of it at the time as being a bit of diversity, but it would have been a nice bit of diversity looking back. Big regrets, never enough female writers. Jack and Alison and Caroline, and I think all of them should have done a lot more scripts than they actually did. Another couple of years they probably would have done, but you know, I was commissioning so far in advance that by the time, like in the case of Alison, by the time 1782 came out, I thought, oh, it'd be nice to get Alison to do another one, but it won't be for another 3 years. Then I'd gone by then. But so there were never enough female writers employed by Big Finish during my time.
I mean, you were really only working with only the monthly range, though, weren't you? You had
Yes.
the monthly range. You did the Davros. You did the Sarah Jane Smith, the Excellus Dawns. But aside from that, it was just dealing with the monthly.
All we could afford to do at that point.
Yeah,
we didn't have the 850 different ranges that they've got now,
and different producers to actually survive doing it.
Well, as I said before, yes, I had lovely support from Ian, and Nick was around once in a blue moon. But fundamentally, for those 8 years, Big Finish was a one-man band. It was just me, and I always thought it was quite amusing. When I left, Jason replaced me with 4 people straight away. And I was like, thanks for that. But yeah, that the output I did was as much as a human being could manage at that time. And I didn't get involved, like John was doing Judge Dredd and Nigel was doing the Tomorrow People and Sapphire and Steel and Nick was doing Dalek Empire and Cybermen and things like that. I deliberately didn't get involved in their jobs at all. My only job then was to make sure their material got on sale and out and to the pressing plant on time. I had no creative input into anything, and nor did I want it. In the same way that if someone had tried to interfere with me on Doctor Who, they'd have had their hands cut off. I didn't believe that it was any business of mine to interfere with what other producers were doing. So, that's why my name would never appear on a Judge Dredd or a Sapphire and Steel CD, because it wasn't my product. There's no point. I did what I did and let other producers get on and be creative in their own sphere. You're not there to sort of make everything. And it comes back to that thing I said at the very beginning, in the same way that I wasn't making Doctor Who to only appeal to my tastes. I didn't want the whole of Big Finish to only appeal to my tastes as well. It had to appeal to Nigel's taste or John Ainsworth's taste or Nick's tastes, so you didn't interfere with what anyone else did. Occasionally it meant that you had similar scripts and you went, oh, whoops, that was a mistake. But, that's life.
So with the Sarah Jane Smith stories you did, what was the choice there? Just you want to work with Elizabeth or?
The Sarah Jane series was just an obvious thing. I mean, we'd worked with Liz. I'd known Liz for 25, 30 years at that point anyway. She'd done Walking to Babylon with us. And I don't think I came up with the idea of doing, or did I? Did I say we should do K9 and Company? Maybe I said we should do K9 and Company, but it's probably only joking. And somebody said, I have a feeling it was John Ainsworth, said, why don't you do a Sarah Jane series, Or maybe it was Jason. Anyway, I went to Liz and said, do you want to do this? And she said, no, God, no, heaven forbid, no, don't want to do that at all. And I said, you sure? No, I don't want to do this. And a week later, I'd go back and go, got some really good ideas for this Sarah Jane series. How about this, this, and this, and this? And in the end, she just went, yeah, let's do this. This will be good. So we went up, we had dinner. She said the things she didn't want it to do, which completely matched all the things I didn't want to do as well. The dog being probably the most vital thing. I think she genuinely thought we were going to try and bring the dog into it at some point. And I said, no, it's about Sarah. It's not about sci-fi things at all. It's Sarah. She's a modern journalist or whatever. She's got friends. It's about seeing what we can do with Sarah Jane. Liz was always, right up to the very end, Liz was incredibly protective of Sarah Jane Smith. She knew Sarah Jane backwards. She was very good at saying Sarah Jane wouldn't do this and wouldn't do that. And I think a lot of what we did in that first, because bear in mind, I didn't do the second series of Sarah Jane because I was already in Cardiff, I think. No, I wasn't. But I didn't do the second series of Sarah Jane. John did it. But for that first series of it, I think it was a very valuable lesson, almost for Liz, as to what you could and couldn't do with Sarah Jane. So that by the time she came to do School Reunion and then Sarah Jane Adventures, she was a lot more confident at playing that character again. And she knew Sarah Jane backwards. And she also knew that she had a voice and could use it to say yes and no to things.
Do you think she would have done School Reunion without having done The Big Finish?
Yes. I'm not that stupid that I think she'd have said no to doing School Reunion. I just think it helped to prepare for it a bit more. I think she'd had that recent experience of playing Sarah again, and therefore it was a lot easier for her to slot into it. But if we'd never done Sarah Jane Adventures on Big Finish, she'd still have done School Reunion and Sarah Jane Adventures on telly. Because why wouldn't she? I mean, they would have been mad to say no to that. But I think we helped her in the sense that we gave her the confidence to play the part again.
Yeah. When she did School Reunion, did she know that Sarah Jane Adventures were going to happen, or was that no?
No, it came out after that. I think as a result of that, it was an easier sell for Russell to say to CBBC, look at Sarah Jane and how she is in School Reunion. That's what I want to do a series about. But I don't think that had ever been mooted to Liz until someone at the BBC said yes to it. And then Russell went to Liz and said, how about this? But I think it was quite a short space of time.
It started very soon, and she was magnificent. So
amazing.
Still very sad by passing. Even that news that day was just shocking.
Yeah, that was hard. She was certainly, I think, would have done some stuff with Tom. I think there would have been a couple of Tom stories with her once they got Tom on board a Big Finish, but that never obviously happened.
I think they were written, weren't they?
Yeah.
I think they were, and I think that conversations have been had with Liz, but of course she wasn't telling everybody how ill she was. So I think it was kind of like, oh, we'll talk about that again at some other point, probably knowing that wasn't going to happen.
Well, Lavinia, I hope you liked your day in the limelight. I think you'd have hated it, actually. All those people going on about how wonderful, how successful, how much a pillar of society you were.
Sarah Jane Smythe.
First I lose the house in Denham, then the flat in Chalk Farm, and now this one. One day I just may get to unpack.
I know you're a famous investigative reporter.
Yeah, well, I used to be. Let's just say the investigating reporter racket's been falling off a bit recently. St. Clotilde's Well.
There, I must correct you. The correct title is Old Clute's Well. Old Clute, as I'm sure you know, is another name for the devil. It was always a place of power. The Christian church took it over, as it did so many pagan places and festivals. But the power was still there, biding its time.
This is Harris. I have a job for Mr. Chakravarti.
Come on, you. I think it might be safer to take public transport.
But what about your car?
Welcome to my world, Mr. Townsend.
I think I shall be asking some important questions of your representative tomorrow.
You really shouldn't do that, Vicar.
Are you threatening me?
Yes, I rather think I am.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Harris. How is Miss Smith?
In mourning.
Nothing compared to how she'll be tomorrow morning.
You have been listening to the Sirens of Audio episode 52, Gary Russell Part 2, being the boss at Big Finish, with your hosts Philip Edney and Dwayne Bunning. Part 3 is coming soon. Next time on the show, it's been 21 years since Annette Badland made her debut in the revived series of Doctor Who, and she'll be joining us to talk about that, her career, and her contributions to Big Finish. Theme music by Husky by the Geek. You'll find his video of the theme on his YouTube channel. Rate, review, subscribe, and love us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Send your emails to sirensofaudio@gmail.com, and our website is sirensofaudio.com. Our Twitter handle is @AudioSirens, and you can find us on Facebook by searching for the Sirens of Audio. And if you want to keep up with the megalomaniacal machinations of all those involved in the creation of audio versions of our favourite TV shows, keep listening to the Sirens of Audio, because audio drama rocks!